My name is Peter Basmajian. I'm a partner and director at Peter Basmajian, and our company is about 30, 40 years old, so we've been around for a while, and we've done a lot of office space in Hong Kong over the years, some of which is co-working, not all of it, but I'll be trying to give you an overview of how office planning has morphed or changed and evolved over the years with a little slideshow.
Thank you, Peter. Now, our second speaker is not an architect, which is quite unusual in AIA chapter seminar or webinar. So his name is Jacky Yeung. Jacky, hi.
Hi, Fei. Yes, unfortunately, I'm not an architect, but we are actually an operator of a local boutique co-working space with 4 locations in Hong Kong. Well, for most people think of co-working, they may think of WeWork, but actually co-working, there could be something else on the other side of the spectrum, which is more B2C, which is to the retail end of the customers. So I will talk a little bit more later on in the presentation. Thank you, Fei.
Thanks, Jacky. So our third speaker is both an architect and also a co-workspace operator, Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Fei, and hi, everyone. Yes, I'm not quite an architect yet. I'm in process of, but I'm Alex, co-founder of redesign, a co-working space in Sha Tin that caters for architects, designers, and creatives. And together with my fellow co-founder and principal of Integrated Design Associates, we will be sharing, and we look forward to sharing with you tonight, how a symbiotic relationship between a co-working space and an architectural practice can make a positive impact on the way we work as an industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So first of all, before we dive into the idea of co-workspace and how it's evolving, how the business is going right now, even under the virus and also social events, I want to take a look at how a nature of work has been changing in the past couple of decades, and sequentially how our workspace design has been changing throughout the years. And of course, we have Peter, who is super experienced in office design. He's been doing it for decades now. So let's welcome Peter to share with us his experience in office design and how the trend is going to move in the future. Peter, do you want to start sharing screen? And you might have to unmute yourself first.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Not yet, not the share screen.
I'm sorry, I have unmuted.
So you have to click on the share screen button, which is in green.
Yeah, I'm on it, and now? Oh, for goodness sake.
There we go.
Okay, I'm sorry, folks. That's what you get, the new technology. Okay, so this is a little quick history of co-working and how we got here from where we started out years ago. Many factors have affected the size of workstations and space planning. Partly technology. Back in the 1970s, it was the selectric typewriter and post, and in the 80s it was the early computers and fax machines, and in the 90s it was the flat screen computers and email, and the 2000s we were getting on into the laptops and Wi-Fi. 2010s, tablets and the cloud, all good stuff. Another thing that has affected the use of workstations and space planning has always been paper. And what we like to think of when we do office planning is the design, but the reality sometimes looks like this, which is what a lot of us are up against a lot of the time. How do we handle the paper? How big are the workstations? Another thing in Hong Kong particularly that affects workstations and space planning is the cost of space. Because as we all know, the cost of property in Hong Kong is very high, and it seems to go up and up and up. I don't need to go through this chart. I think you all understand that generally speaking, the cost of space in Hong Kong has gone up over the years. There was a dip here in the 2003-2004 period and in here, but generally speaking, it goes up. In the olden days, what we used to do was these plans where there were perimeter offices around the exterior of the building, and we had very nice system furniture, some cubicles, but mostly offices. Sharing office space is not really a new idea. In the late 1990s, a lot of people were building business centers where sharing space was, the idea of it was coming into play, but it was sharing rooms with doors. It was almost like renting a hotel room. There were lots of rooms, but no open plan space or collaboration areas. Long ago, cubicles seemed to be the way to go. Now, this is an open plan office, the photograph on the left. It's something that was done in the 1990s, but we didn't do it, I'm happy to say. But we did do the plan on the right, which, as you can see, is a plan of Exchange Square. And it's just a cube farm, and it is something that we did. And it's the kind of thing that became fodder for cartoonists. The cube farm handbook here in the center, the idea of people being locked into their cubicle day after day, hour after hour, and indeed the Dilbert cartoon on the right. Everybody knows Dilbert, the guy who's always stuck in his cubicle and arguing with the boss. Other cartoons, the great Wiley Miller. I think this one is particularly apt. The future archaeologists come along and they dig up a bunch of cubicles and they classify it as a late 20th century prison, which in fact is what a lot of people think cubicles are like. Slowly, however, planning did loosen up and collaboration areas started to appear. Now on the left you can see this is what you were all used to seeing, this kind of planning minus the chairs, which is a very sort of a rigid plan. And slowly things began to loosen up a little bit in the center. And now we like to think that we're in a more collaborative time with lots of variety of furniture and communication and spaces flowing into each other. Taken to an extreme, this project here in 1994 is the T.H.E advertising office in New York. When I say extreme, it's very extreme. I mean, it was the early idea of bringing the playroom into the office with the pool table and the punching bags in here, the speed bags, I think they're called, the resin furniture, the resin floor, and on the right you can see the store, which is where they handed out early cell phones and laptops. The whole idea was hot desks, no fixed seating, early work from home, no pandemic at the time, but work from home. All the furniture was movable. You can see none of it's sort of fixed or difficult to move. And the idea was that the office was paperless. I don't think this office lasted too long, but it was an attempt. by the late 2000s, aughts, this is a project we did for a business center in Central, where shared facilities started to become more open and acceptable. It wasn't a pantry in a room with a door. It was open. You could just sort of stroll up to it while you were walking around the office. But this was still not co-working. High rents continued to drive the transition to getting people closer together. Bench desking is what we would call it 5 years ago. Janus Capital. You can see these desks in yellow are the benches, which you see here in the view, where people are really right next to each other. They may not even be 1.5 meters wide, but you got more people into less space, and it's all about the efficiency and the economy, saving money on rent. It wasn't always cubicles, it wasn't always benches. This is a project we did in 2 years ago. 95% open plan, but they're not benches and they're not cubicles. They're more these sort of pods, generally 6-person pods, some 9-person pods that look something like this, which of course are informed by the idea of the ships waiting to dock or to be unloaded. And in fact, this was a shipping company, so it seemed to be appropriate for them. The collaboration pods and phone booths moved in. These are proprietary items that you can buy more or less off the shelf. You can choose the color you like. And as everything became more open, the staff realized that they couldn't make a private phone call without having some kind of a phone booth or a meeting room to go into to speak to their doctor, their lawyer, their spouse, what have you. And the collaboration pods, where you have a bit of privacy if you're sitting down, there's a table in there, but people walking by can actually look in as they're walking by. And these bits of furniture became essential as offices became more open. This is an early, a very small co-working space that we did in Central for a company called Urban Properties, which looks, as you can see in the photographs in the center and on the right, where you have a sort of a perimeter of offices and a few meeting rooms. And you also have a central area of co-working desks, pretty much jammed right up against each other, as in that picture for Janus Capital, and a few more rooms with doors here in the back that you can rent out for 2 people or 3 people or 4 people. A project we're working on now for Soho Works, which, as some of you know, is a large UK company with facilities all over the world, and they're in big expansion mode, although at the moment this particular project is slightly on hold. But this is their Soho Works part of a building in Sheung Wan, not far from my own office, where they're doing several floors of co-working space, where the areas in purple are actually offices for 3, 5, 6, 8 people, and the areas in green are meeting rooms that you can book. And these areas in purple are a quiet room. It's, again, it's like a little phone booth, a cafe, and a sort of a wellness room. I believe that's a massage chair in there. And of course, let's not forget, there needs to be some work done, and some people, for some areas there, people can rent just a desk. And these are very small desks. They're not 1.5, I think they're about 1.2 or 1.3 meter desks. So the question everybody's asking is, of course, in this area of the era of the pandemic, is what will shape the co-working future? Certainly, more fluid ways of working, the open desks, the phone booths where you can make the private call, more shared desking in here, extensive amenities, libraries, breakout areas, chill spaces. This is actually a picture of Facebook, which I'm going to show you a little bit more of in a few minutes. Collaboration areas, phone booths areas, exercise areas, and so on. amenities are going to be very important. But really what's very, quite apt now are indeed apps. Apps and millennials are shaping the future. It's all about, Instagram and millennials always on their devices. Grab food and Uber and so on and so forth. And certainly the message of the moment is COVID-19. And this also is going to shape the future, because not a day goes by that I don't get 2 or 3 articles that come in by email on how to redesign offices for life with coronaviruses. This one is from Business Insider. Gensler has created a physical distancing software in the UK for their UK clients. This is an Italian article about distancing and minimum distancing between people in offices. So really what we have to look forward to are auto doors and taps, the sanitizer stations, lower densities, fewer seats in meeting rooms, possibly screens between all desks, in front of you, on the side, and definitely more work from home. That is the mantra. Yesterday I attended a Steelcase webinar where they confirmed all of this. This is a 30-page document that you can download from the Steelcase website, and they reiterated that it's all about fewer people per square foot, density, the geometry, the shape and orientation of workstations, and division, screens and panels for separation, all of which they say is meant to engender trust, and that means the trust that people have in coming back into the office. And it's going to make technology even more important. You remember these images from previously, especially for remote working, where we're all going to be using these tools on the right, the Microsoft Teams and WebEx and indeed what we're using now, Zoom. Because everything old, Johnson Wax headquarters pictured here in Racine, Wisconsin, and this is almost 100 years ago, is going to be new again. This is Facebook, Hong Kong, a project we finished in April last year, where people aren't as far apart as you see here in the Johnson Wax headquarters, but they're placed at, some of them are placed at different angles. And this is going to become, the idea of putting in screens in between is probably going to become more predominant. Now, I'm just going to end with a quick overview of Facebook in Hong Kong, but we need to remember that Facebook is not an actual co-working space. It's not open to the public. It's not like Jacky's project that we're going to see next. So at a glance, Facebook is a company where nobody has an office. Everybody gets an identical sit-stand desk, 750 by 1500. There are many collaboration areas, meeting rooms, extensive amenities, mother's rooms and walk mills, IT peripherals, vending machines. So we've worked with Facebook for 5 years. The first project we did was in 2014, 10,000 square feet, half a floor of One Island East on the 60th floor. And then 2 years after that, we did a complete floor on One Island East. And then 3 years later, we completed 4 floors for them in the building next door, One Taikoo Place, where there are 70,000 square feet, 350 staff, and an interconnecting stair that connects all the floors. So a few words about some of the facilities that they have here in colors. The red are their meeting rooms. You can see how meeting rooms became more important over the 5-year period. Cozy rooms, which are defined as 8-foot by 8-foot rooms for 2, generally used for teleconferencing, and collaboration spaces, which also increased in quantity. And you can see that on this chart here for the collaboration areas. The meeting rooms went way up, and the cozies went way up. And it looks something like this. In 2014 on the left, it was a little reception area like this. The picture is taken from the reception counter. By 2019, on the top floor of One Taikoo Place. It looks a little bit more grand. We are not responsible for this graffiti artwork here, but Facebook put that together themselves. Facebook villages, there were fewer of them in 2014, many of them in 2019. Chill spaces, which is what they call collaboration areas, which are very, very important. And Jacky and Alex will talk a little bit more about that. IT help desks where you can, if you have the requisite card, you can go and take something out of this vending machine here with the Facebook access card. All hand spaces, it was a bit smaller in 2014, very, very big in 2019 on the top floor of their facility at One Taikoo Place. Micro kitchens is what they had in 2014 and 2016. By 2019, they have a singing and dancing cafe with a full service kitchen in here. This was meant to be done as a sort of a Hong Kong Dai Pai Dong style. And the secret room, which is a little room where you can go in, take pictures of yourself against these emoji backgrounds. It doesn't look to be so secret here, but there is now a sliding bookcase that goes over this entrance here, so they can bring their guests up and slide the bookcase back and take them in to have a photograph taken. So that's really the end of what I wanted to run through. It's a little bit of background on office planning and a little bit of background on co-working in Hong Kong and some of the work we've done on Facebook offices.
Thank you, Peter. So based on Peter's presentation, it really sounded like flexibility is the key of our future office design. And especially in a place like Hong Kong, not every company can afford a Facebook-like office where every employee gets to have, 200 square feet of space by themselves, although there's no fixed seat or there's no enclosed office. But then if you divide the whole office by the number of employees that stayed in there, it's actually quite a amazing number, like 200 square feet per person.
Sorry, Fei, it's actually a little deceptive. It was about 142 to 168 if you don't include the top floor of One Taikoo Place, which skews the calculation. So they're not hugely generous, but nobody gets an office. That is a fact, yes.
I see. So let's say I am a company that is not Facebook, and I cannot afford the rental of a Facebook office. So how could I make that kind of office space available for myself or my employees? So that's where co-workspace would come in and fill the gap in our market. So let's welcome Jacky to share with us his company called Desk-one. Jacky, please.
Sure, thank you, Fei. Let me share the screen, just one moment. All right, so perhaps that's something on a similar line that Peter went through with you. Well, co-working also, it's like offices, it's been here for decades. Co-working, the initial idea without this fancy buzzword, it started with something like subdivided offices. Well, meaning people just more focus on the desk space. And then we have players which have been in the market for over 20 years, like Rick's coming in. Well, they serve the service office market. For small companies, they want a professional feel when they meet clients. Well, they will go to the service offices. And in recent years, with the rise of WeWork, well, co-working becomes sort of the trend. More the millennials and people, the young startups, well, they would prefer more focus on the work-life balance and the collaborative nature. But all in all, the so-called co-working have not really changed in the past 20, 30 years. why this industry exists, it's because of the cost efficiency of the shared economy, meaning that, well, if they share the facilities of the meeting rooms, they share the facilities of the event space, which they would only require to use once in a while, well, they can bring down the cost of these small companies if they share the office together. And plus, what's more, it's the perks on what we so-called the collaborative synergies between companies. People sharing the common area, people are hoping that there will be networking experience, there will be new business opportunities. That's been the hype of the co-working in the past few years. Well, but unfortunately, as all of you may know, well, co-working started to struggle, well, even before the COVID-19 hit. So we have been seeing a lot of news saying, well, some operators have been surrendering their offices. WeWork started to struggle with that, with a failed IPO. So what is actually the bright side of co-working, and from an architect perhaps or design perspective? Well, how co-working can basically be passed, some of the elements of co-working can be part of your next project. So today in my presentation, I'm going through perhaps just a few areas of co-working. One is just to share with you some typical co-working operators design in Hong Kong. Later on, we'll share with you more about Desk-one, our company, how we differentiate against the more traditional co-working space industry. And after all, we'll also share with you how we look at it for co-working in order to rise again in the future. So this is on the right, this is sort of a typical floor design for most co-working space in Hong Kong. Typically for especially the higher end ones, this tends to take a full floor or even multiple floor in grade A, top grade A offices in Hong Kong. The floor plan I'm showing is actually one of the co-working space floor in Times Square. Because of the high rent, actually many co-working space operators in Hong Kong struggle, because in order to make sure they can pay for the high rents, they need to pay for the ultimate landlord. The only way that they can achieve that is to divide as many private offices as possible. So as you can see in this floor plan, which is recently opened 2 years ago and actually shut down after 6 months of operations. You can see they've tried to divide one floor plate into many small offices. And basically they hope that by renting out the offices, they would make a profit and pay the rent. And this also partly driven by the more Asian office culture in general. In terms of most co-working space in Asia, they're actually hot desks or fixed desks, they're harder to sell. So many small companies, no matter how small they are, they prefer to have their small offices. As you can see in this floor plan, there are some small offices as small as some one-person offices without windows. For this type of design, it's encouraged many architects and designers who assist the co-working space to maximize the number of rooms. Well, that could be the pro side, but actually it also be the con sides when the economies and when the competition grows. This also makes why co-working space industry in Hong Kong is in such a challenging position. It's not only because of the high rent, it's also because many of the designs that at the beginning, they thought they could lease out the office space. But in general, the smaller the units, especially without natural lights, it's harder for them to lease out. And with the occupancy lower than what they expected, it makes the operating environment challenge for many co-working space operators. So if the co-working space industry is that competitive, why did Desk-one perhaps we started 3.5 years ago, and how do we look at co-working? Well, co-working has been in the Europe and US for like 10 years now. It's not a new concept. It's not a new concept when we started Desk-one. So if we want to be one of the players in the co-working in Hong Kong, well, we try to think of it creatively and have a new angle. I am not an architect, but I'm actually in finance field for some years. And when I started, after graduated and started my career in the mid-20s and early 30s, many people, perhaps for architects as well, you not only you will do your 9 to 5 office work, but you also have a lot of outside work commitments. Take myself, for example. Well, after graduating, perhaps you still have a lot of professional exams or upper degrees that you need to fulfill. Well, those could be classified as work as well. You may have other NGO commitments, you know, there's other side projects that you're working on. Well, those could be classified as work as well. Well, work to us in this generation, it's no longer about, well, 9 to 6 working at an office. It's about how you squeeze in the morning time and how you squeeze in the evening time, as well as how you squeeze in the weekends times to make sure you are making positive output. It may not be really work related. It could be you are working on a redesign project of a friend's cafe just down around the corner. You could be taking on some freelance side projects. All these are actually work. But many people think co-working space as a replacement of office. But for us, when we started Desk-one, we think, well, work could actually be happening everywhere, not only at office. Well, many co-working space operators focus on leasing out their space 6 months or 12 months to start up when they look at it as an office use. But for us, as for this generation, we think there are a lot of things happen outside the traditional understanding of work. It could be a meeting for a freelance project. It could be studying for your professional exams in the library. It could be along your work travel. You might be working on an airport lounge. You may be taking course on an Uber, and you may be, well, have some leisure readings on the industry trends in a cafe, or even having a Zoom meeting now. The location of work is important. Well, you couldn't do your freelance work at your full-time office. Well, you couldn't really study for your professional exams in your office as well. So you need a space for it. And we feel, well, that's a gap that we could build based on the co-working space platform and adding on the cafe and as well as the library element to make it work. And this is how Desk-one comes in. Well, we are basically a chain of collaborative space. We can call it a co-working space, but effectively it's a collaborative space which allow people to work and perhaps to learn as well as to study as well. Unlike most traditional co-working space, they at least tie you in for 6 months or 12 months. Well, we created a new co-working style in a sense that there's no contracts, no restriction. You can walk in anytime to get your desk with natural lights and view, and it's on demand as well. So the pricing could be from per hour to per 3 hours or per day. Surprisingly, I guess for most co-working space operator, perhaps over 90% of their revenue would be from leasing out private offices in Hong Kong. But for us, it's actually more than 90% of our revenue are actually from so-called a hot desk, meaning that it's a flexible and on-demand terms. So Desk-one has been focusing a very niche and I would say it's more B2C type of consumer clientele. Not only we are focusing only the micro companies, meaning companies with only 1 to 3 persons, we focus also on some freelancers or even professional exams takers and students. Well, the space that they typically required would usually be smaller, and actually the frequency and the time, they would not be as frequent as a frequent office user where you need to be in the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They could come in as they need, and it would be work similar style as a cafe. And also in terms of the choice of office buildings and floor plates, where we tend to choose smaller locations, we try to have many more locations as readily as available. And we typically choose more Grade B type of buildings because of cost, but we build it in on interior designs to help it works. In this slide, there are a few photos showing some of our spaces. I guess from the left, it's more the reading lounge. You can see people actually sharing desks and working closely together. We also have some individual desks with some partitions and privacies, but as you can tell, the desk size is not small. This is not big, but it's adequate for people who bring their laptops as well as their readings and comes into work. We also have some small meeting rooms. It will be similar to the cozy style, which Peter mentioned in the Facebook office, would be more smaller private rooms which cater for some meetings and even for some casual meetings as well as business meetings. So we have 4 locations in Hong Kong. Perhaps we could just go through some of the design elements we have as well. While many co-working space would feature, they have a ping pong table. Well, we do have a ping pong table as well, but because of our limited size, it's not a playroom. It's essentially one of the work desks. Well, we try to play around with design and also with different type of seats and different type of orientation to give adequate choices of different work style. And in our area, we mainly divide it into 3 sort of zones, where we have the quiet focus zones, which more focus slightly more the individual desks, and we have some partition in between. It's more a quiet area, work similar to a library, which allows people to focus. We also have a reading lounge, which works relatively with a cafe vibe. People can do small chats here. We have sofas, we have shared desks, we have some window seats as well to make sure people can work and chill at the same time. We also have some small private rooms. Unlike a working space, you would think, well, meeting rooms is for meeting, but for our private room, it's actually for many multi-purposes. You may think about workshops, you may think about student discussing projects, you may think about insurance deals could be happening inside the private rooms. We are serving a much wide audience in our space. This is such a floor plan to show how our space would actually design and look like. This is actually one of our location in Mong Kok. We separate into a few areas. One of the design criteria that we have, especially on the quiet zone, is make sure within the limited space, everyone would also have their own privacy. So while we are trying to do it with different orientations, we have some partitions in between as well. We are doing it more in a budget and low-cost way and trying to be more artsy instead of using traditional office furniture. But in terms of the entire vibe, it's create an ambience and environment that allow people to focus and to work. And in the reading lounge area, we also build in some more bigger and shared tables. This is one of the ping pong table that I mentioned that we put in the middle. And we also have more sofa areas and different desks with orientations. In terms of picking our locations, one of the few criteria that we have been looking at is the natural light. So with all these seats, these are actually all the window seats. So basically, they would be facing the windows, enjoying the view without disturbance, while the more share area at the back, they can still enjoy some of the natural lights coming in. And with business sort of growing, we actually grow into another half floor on the 22nd floor in Mong Kok as well, whereby we cater more in terms of the private room space as well as event space. So that's pretty much it, how Desk-one would work. And this is sort of a similar design style, which across our 4 locations as well. So the next question is, as I've briefly talked about, well, co-working, it's sort of a struggling and challenging industry at the moment. So perhaps for architects and designers, well, I would say it's relatively unlikely that there will be a lot of new co-working space projects in the next 12 to 18 months. So on co-working, how could design value add from an operator perspective? Actually, not necessarily co-working can be integrated into an office space. Well, it could be integrated to a F&B space as well. Well, Starbucks recently collabed with JR East in Japan, and they've actually started almost over 10 locations starting in March this year, focusing on the upscale type, co-working type of Starbucks cafe. You may have seen in many Starbucks in Hong Kong, people are working or studying in a Starbucks, but basically the design, it's not for that. But for this type of smart lounge, as Starbucks called it in Japan, they have station work, which they provide private space, more like a phone booth for conference call. They also make sure they have individual electric sockets for all the individual seats. And they also build in additional privacy as well in order for people to work. Well, that could be one of the angle that co-working might be as an element integrated into different type of space. And in Hong Kong, perhaps from an architect perspective, when you work next on a residential development project, for example, for Sun Hung K, for example, co-working could be also one of the elements that you could be thought of in terms of a clubhouse design. With more and more people perhaps choose to work from home and the demand of co-working space, it not necessarily co-working as a collaborative space needs to happen in an office setting. It could happen in other casual setting as well. And of course, COVID-19 has a tremendous effect on offices and co-working. I guess Peter also shared some of his insights regarding how social distancing may work and may impact in terms of the future office design. But from my perspective, I will look at it a more longer term because I guess for COVID-19, it's almost like a social experiment for work from home every day. Essentially, there have been a lot of tech companies nowadays, they could be work from home permanently. Well, I guess that's not realistic for most of the firms, but I guess we are seeing a trend that while people may choose to work instead of a 5-day work week, there could be a 3-day or 4-day work week in the future, whereby the remaining 1 or 2 days will become a work from home or work from anywhere environment. And this could be a new demand boost for a lot of co-working space, which if they are flexible and on demand enough, they could fill this gap. So that's pretty much it for my presentation today. And I hope I do share some insight from a design angle for the architect's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacky. Before we move on to the next speaker, I'd like to remind everybody that you can use the Q&A button to type in the question, either for any of the speaker or just for the audience as well. And after the last presentation, we'll pick out some questions and then read it to everybody and let our speaker respond to that. So now we all know that Jacky's business basically is a very niche market, right? It's focusing on the micro segment of a small space and of a small time segment by hour or by day. And the next speaker, Alex, will talk to us about a very niche market, which is specifically co-working space that serves only architects or designers. So let's hear what Alex would like to share with us. Alex, please.
Right, hold on. I'm also struggling to share screen for some reason. Here we go. All right, you should be able to see what I have on my screen now. Thank you so much, Fei, for that, and Jacky and Peter for catching us up on the evolution of how we work. So, as I mentioned, I'm Alex. I'm co-founder of The Design. We are a co-working space in Sha Tin that caters for architects, designers, and creatives. And together with my co-founder, principal of Integrated Design Associates, I'm going to be sharing with you how we see a symbiotic relationship between architectural companies and a co-working space. And I'll do that by breaking it down into 3 questions. What value does a co-working space add to a company? What other value can a co-working space add to architectural companies? And how do we do this? So what value does a co-working space add to a company? As Peter and Jacky have both discussed, the way that we have worked has changed a lot over the past few decades. One of which is how mobile we are now because of Wi-Fi, because we are constantly on the go, whether you have a side hustle or not. We always look for a place to work, and it's not always home. We don't always have to work from home. Sure, it's a nice option, but some people want to get away from the kids. Some people want to work in town, be closer to their clients. And so co-working spaces have that availability to most workers. if you have a meeting in Central, a lunch appointment in T.H.E, you're never really all that far away from a co-working space. So the availability of space has a certain amount of appeal. The other reason for co-working space's popularity is that we're starting to, as shown in Peter's presentation, we're starting to embrace how amenities can really improve staff and worker morale. We're really embracing the idea that a happy employee is a good employee, and the amenities of free coffee, beer, snacks, a meditation room can really contribute to boosting that morale and productivity. And these are typically amenities that were out of reach for a lot of smaller companies, but by joining a co-working space, they now get to benefit from these things. The other aspect that makes co-working spaces so interesting is that they're also a huge cost saver. By having readily furnished offices, we are reducing the amount of money spent on decorating and reinstating. And by providing short-term or flexible rental systems, a company can grow and shrink its number of desks and the amount of time that it spends in a co-working space, making them highly appealing, especially to young startups where their risk is now minimized. Likewise, the sense of community is really appealing, especially in co-working spaces like WeWork. Because the community is so inclusive, the spaces are typically designed to accommodate the many ways in which people work. Whether you are interested in working in a buzzing cafe or quiet library space, co-working spaces have it all. Additionally, the sense of community at co-working spaces also leads to something called serendipitous encounters, whereby you could potentially meet your next client or collaborator at the water fountain or at the cafe. So what other values can a co-working space add to architectural companies? When I talked earlier about community and serendipitous encounters, a typical working space occupied by tech startups, accountants, lawyers, bankers, and designers, the possibility of collaboration is a lot lower. But by focusing our co-working space on an industry such as design, we believe that these serendipitous encounters can now happen with a greater purpose and synergy. Similarly, resources. It's hard for a co-working space, especially in Hong Kong, where space is so limited, to provide so many different resources to so many different industries, that by focusing on a design industry, the design industry, we can provide resources like a network of prospective clients, consultants that can be shared amongst one another, 3D printers, material libraries, and even design-focused workshops and review spaces. All these design-specific benefits that typical co-working spaces can't always provide. And the major opportunity we see in a co-working space and an architecture firm working together is the relationship between more established architecture firms or design firms and younger startups. By sharing the space between design startups, freelancers, and more established companies, like my co-founder, Integrated Design Associates, a symbiotic relationship can be similar to that of a mentor and mentee, where, for example, IDA can outsource some of its production and design work to the young startups, while the young startup can benefit from the opportunity to work on projects that they might not typically get this early on in their career. So how do we do all these things? I'll break it down a little further. How do we better serve young practices to overcome their startup challenges? And how might we promote cross-pollination between these design disciplines? When the idea for the design started, we interviewed about 50 designers, architects, and artists, and we found that their underlying challenges lay in 4 main categories: finding space, finding jobs, finding talent, and finding or developing the skills necessary to run a business. And the best way we can explain how we help these young practices is by telling you a short story. So we interviewed 50 designers, and they're represented here by T.H.E, a young architect, studied overseas, came back to Hong Kong, worked for a small or big company, and has recently left to start up a company with his friend. This is a fairly common story that we've heard from all our interviewees. And like any business, they have their fears and challenges which they need to overcome without compromising their values. Specifically, the four challenges I mentioned earlier: finding jobs, space, staff, and developing skills. So since we at The Design champion collaboration and design, when we had our opening, we actually invited a selection of designers to showcase local talent, giving them the kind of exposure they need to get their work out. T.H.E was among some of the exhibitors displaying their work. And as we share our space with IDA invited their clients to show them their new offices. And we introduced the client to T.H.E and his work, and sure enough, the client really liked the work we showed him. And the design facilitated the relationship between T.H.E, IDA, and the client. And now the client has approved T.H.E's proposal to have his design featured on the facade of a new project here in Hong Kong. And this is an opportunity that would have been highly unlikely if we weren't there to facilitate that kind of relationship. Now, the other issue I wanted to talk about was cross-pollination. How do we promote cross-pollination? Our assumption was that a lot of designers and design industries and design firms are actually quite siloed off from one another. They spend most of their time looking out for their own, being responsible for their own marketing, their own publicity and promotion, and there's not a lot of natural collaboration that happens between them. And we were interested in what would happen if we house them under one co-working space. What would that look like? What would happen if these industries shared a water fountain, a cafe, meeting rooms, event spaces? What that could look like. And so we came up with this diagram to sort of illustrate what we believe would happen when we create these connectors between these industries, not just in the figurative sense, but also in the literal sense, in a physical sense, where people, or rather designers from architecture, could collaborate with a UX designer to design what the next level of shopping mall could look like, or an interior designer and a fashion designer work together to design the next pop-up. What could that look like? We don't just design the workspace itself, but also the spaces in between that facilitate the connection between these industries. And then when we talk about opening the doors to the public, we envision the design to be a one-stop shop for all of your design needs, whether you are a homeowner looking to design your redesign or redecorate your home, or whether you are a tech company that needs to design a new product, or even to design your new headquarters. By us as a co-working space, by the design forging these relationships for our members, we don't incubate them so much by investing capital in exchange for shares or equity. We invest in them through the relationships we build. And at the same time, provide a space conducive to design, networking, and collaboration, a space that provides for all of a designer's needs. So I can take you on a quick tour through our space. Here is our main entrance. We are serviced by 2 pedestrian lifts and cargo lifts, which actually makes the event space really interesting, because we've been approached by a small lighting company to hold events here, and they typically struggle to get their equipment into an event space if it's held at a hotel. So we have these insanely large cargo lifts that can bring large equipment straight into the event space. We designed it so that there's a common spine of public area so people can circulate, and all of these, the common areas are mixing spaces from the printing room, reception area, pantry, and general hangout areas and lounges. At the bottom right, you can see the hot desks, orange dedicated desks, and in blue, the enclosed offices. We share the space with integrated design associates, so they're here in yellow, and we have an anchor tenant that provides underfloor air conditioning. They actually provided our air conditioning here, called AET. I won't go into too much detail about it. The space itself is naturally lit with high ceilings and large windows, and people often ask me, why did you pick Sha Tin? It's so far away. And my answer is that it is near impossible to find this quality of space on the island, especially with our budget. Within our budget, we would be lucky to find a space half this size that doesn't look into someone's bathroom. And we were also looking later down the line to find that the MTR services will connect Sha Tin to Admiralty in under 10 stops. So right now, yes, we might seem far, but further afield, we're not that different, actually, from, say, North Point to Central. Likewise, we provide review spaces. When I was taking tours of co-working spaces, I noticed that there was a distinct lack of whiteboard spaces and review spaces that as architects and designers, we love to pin up our work and have teams just look at them and get feedback. And this is an opportunity, we thought, for an architecture firm to pin up and see what a graphic designer, an interior designer, or a product designer would have to say about a project. Seeing design from multiple scales is insight, or will provide insight that as a standalone company, you might not always benefit from. Okay. The last bit that I want to go into is that I was asked to address how we were affected or how we are responding to COVID-19. And it is purely through designing for a higher quality and a healthier workspace for our users that we don't foresee us being affected that much by COVID-19. It has pulled back the curtain on traditional models of space and office design, where I think it was mentioned earlier that the square foot per person has typically been designed to be efficient and economical. But with the current pandemic, it has proven to be less healthy. We designed for designers. We knew designers value space and light. So we deliberately put a lot of space between our users. I think in most office buildings in Hong Kong, it is about 80 to 120 square foot per person. Maybe someone can correct me on that. If anyone knows, please let me know. But we designed it to be about 125 square feet per person net, thereby allowing our members to adhere to social distancing rules. Our desks are about 1.5 meters across, meaning that the minimum social distance is actually applied between desks. So that's actually it. We are the design. We stand for technology, humanity, and environment. And by focusing our design, our co-working space on the design industry, we aim to be more than just a co-working space, but rather a holistic and dynamic design ecosystem. Thank you. Oh, and feel free to follow us.
Great job on the very last slide, Alex. So right now, I'm gonna read out some of the questions that we've received throughout all three presentations. So this question's from Florence, asking about the NFA per person, net floor area per person when designing an office. So this question is for Peter. So whenever we're designing office or when we're planning for office, there's usually a net floor area per person that we work towards. So do you find this NFA per person increase based on the current trend of emphasizing extensive breakout spaces?
Well, in fact, not really, because the addition of breakout spaces and collaboration areas and games rooms and so on seems to be offset by the fact that the workspace is getting smaller. I mean, in the old days, as I showed earlier, a cubicle might take up 6 feet by 8 feet, or 1.8 meters by 2.4 meters, or 1.6 by 1.6. Nowadays it's much more common, or it has been more common up until this pandemic, for bench desking, 1.5 meters, 1.6, 1.3, and in fact, operators and companies are generally trying to get as many people as possible into as little space as possible, which is why the three of us are trying to address this question of, what is the future, with this, this fear that people have about coming back into the office, an enclosed space, sitting cheek by jowl, next to, somebody else or across from somebody else. What if they cough? What if they sneeze? What if I'm not wearing a mask? What if they're not wearing a mask? And I think everybody is really feeling their way as to what the effect will be on space standards going forward. And it's a particular problem in Hong Kong because space is so expensive, and nobody wants to take a lot of space that is just seems unnecessary. But in this new era, it might become more necessary than it has been up until this year, this spring.
Thank you, Peter. So here we have a question for Alex. So Winston asked that the synergy that Archie, your fictitious user, benefits from vertical integration, and it's looking really promising. So other than having a setup such as the mills that they offer turnkey solution to incubator to market, is there a reason why the design is doing all the hard work of matchmaking but not directly investing, or is directly investing into the small startups is already in the picture?
Right. Well, that's a really interesting question. To answer that, I need to go back in time to break down how I saw the business of design. It's not like a product company where we have to get a product out there and manufacture and make the prototypes and design. What we don't scale in the same way, and so investments we don't need to invest in starting up. In fact, most design startups are just one person at home with a computer or a drawing board, designing a client's house or a small product for themselves. To scale up, to scale the company up, I think doesn't require so much in terms of investment and capital. It does require the relationships between clients and new staff rather than it does on capital to grow the office. So no, we don't so much invest in terms of capital, but mostly in terms of relationships.
Thanks, Alex. Our next question is for Jacky. So Desk-one, instead of going for the co-working amenities, having a lot of fancy spaces, you guys gone for the core of work, which is individual, really focused space. And for your work analysis slide, one could argue that there is, in fact, a phenomenon of fragmentation of individual work, from a 9 to 5 to a guerrilla warfare style. From full-time to freelance, this kind of style change. In the time that you've been operating so far in the past couple of years, do you see this segment growing, especially as the world becomes more volatile these days?
Yeah, I guess the segment is definitely growing. Actually, on COVID-19, it has brought up a slightly positive impact instead of a negative impact to our business, because I guess with the increasing of number of people working from home, they still can't really work from home sort of Monday to Friday. They may be disturbed by the kids at home. They may need a silence room for Zoom or for conference call. Well, sometimes they couldn't get back to the office and they couldn't stay home. They still need a place to go and to focus on their work. And sometimes our space like Desk-one and some co-working space operators who more focus on the on-demand and the flexible nature of co-working could actually provide them with a space. So we do see it's actually getting more and more people who think, well, if they want fun, well, they could go to a restaurant and they can go to a bar for social gathering. But if they want to go for work and they want to discuss about projects and they would go to for business casually, like for example, for interior design project, for example, they may choose a co-working space who can provide on-demand and flexible service like us.
Just a branching out side question. So we all know that in the past 6 months or almost a year now, Hong Kong has been going through a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Both, yeah. So how has Desk-one been affected, or are you guys doing any changes to respond to this kind of social change?
I guess in terms of the social movement, it's been quite impacting our business quite a bit, because many of the protests are actually happening very close to our locations, given how centrally located our locations are. That's definitely bringing some safety issues to some of our users as well as our staff members as well. But I think on a positive note, I guess with 3 or 4 years of operating, more people know about us, and when people think about work or when people think about study, when they need a space on demand, they will come to us. I guess even under COVID-19 situation, business has been doing not too bad for us.
Good to hear. How about Alex? How's the current situation been affecting the design?
Well, besides the fact that not many people are out and about and walking around and stumbling into our space, we haven't had to make many changes. We have had to increase security at the door. We take everyone's temperature, and we put up more alcohol and sanitizing dispensers. But besides that, our space is pretty spaced out. So I believe that people are still able to adhere to the rules of social distancing while not, but at the same time, people aren't really coming out that much. Really, that's probably our biggest impact.
Got it. So this question is from T.H.E, asking, I guess, all 3 speakers. Can you describe your ideal workspace? Say in like 5 sentences. Peter, do you want to take a start?
My ideal workspace. Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a sit-stand desk, which I confess I do not have now, but I think I should probably have. And an open plan with good natural daylight and reasonable temperature control, and not too much noise. A nice view would be good to have. I don't have that now, but because we're only on the 1st floor. But it's I think it's really about the ergonomics. It's about the you know, the surface that you work at, because everybody's desk is basically a flat surface. So we always advise our clients to spend more money and more time thinking about their chairs or the stools that they're sitting on, because it's more important to get a good quality product there. As well as, you know, if you're buying a sit-stand desk, the mechanics and the motorization of it. But I think really, you know, an open space that's an open plan space where good acoustic attenuation, good daylight, a bit of a view would be nice, and good desk and a good chair, really.
Right. Well, to answer this question, maybe I would do some marketing pitch here as well. I guess my ideal workspace would be my full-time private office and my full-time office desk, of course. Well, you have a private office, you have Android, your natural lights, and you have a huge desk with all well-connected IT and computer devices. But as different type of works would require different type of workspace, well, very often I found, well, during my weekends or even my after work hours, working at Desk-one would be quite nice as well, because I guess for different type of work, you may need a different type of vibe or different work environment. So having the flexibility, I think it's just part of the ideal workspace.
I guess my ideal workplace would be a lounge chair on a beach in Phuket, and I'd be testing sunbeds all day. That would be my ideal workplace, but short of that, I love working with noise around me. I like hearing people buzzing around me. My ideal workplace would actually have a workshop where I can hear machinery in the background, and I myself could be working on something, designing and building something with my hands. But in architecture and model making, I was promised a lot more model making when I went into architecture. We do not do that much anymore, but definitely wide desks, natural light, a stand-sit desk would be fantastic. At least an environment that sort of adjusts itself to what I'm feeling like at the time. Noise to be shut off and on whenever I want it to, sit, stand whenever I want it to. Really, whatever I feel like, if a workspace can adjust itself to that, to me, that would be fantastic.
All right, so Peter is basically a salesperson for the WELL certificate exam, because all the things that you mentioned are kind of in the WELL certificate. Acoustic, ergonomic furniture, natural light and air, temperature changing, controlled by each user. And so Alex is more of a sci-fi person. You want to jump from the beach to the quiet office and then having a materials library right next to you at the same time. And then Jacky is just, yeah, business person. So we see the difference between architects and businessmen here. And other question from Belle is, so this one is very practical. So what kind of open office layout would you recommend for small teams with limited space while promoting collaboration and recharge zones all at the same time? Are movable desks recommended to increase the flexibility of the layout, or is that the only way to do it? Any thoughts on that? Maybe we start with Peter.
Honestly, it really depends on the industry. I think are movable desks common to increase layout flexibility? Not as common as you would think, no, because really people are not really crazy about schlepping furniture around in an office just to change an arrangement. I mean, I know there is furniture on wheels. It's more common in meeting rooms where you want to make the meeting room bigger or smaller and move the tables in or out and that sort of thing. But within an actual office environment where people are working, and cabling is part of the equation, because like it or not, you can work, you can do your information on Wi-Fi, but you can't do your power without a cable. You know, your power needs to be cabled somehow to an outlet, and outlets are fixed, and you know, they generally tend to come with a desk or a table, and it makes it difficult to move those things around. You can move them a little bit, maybe, but a small team with limited space, I guess, you know, sort of a nice big room with, you know, maybe a corner with a sort of a bullpen or a brainstorming area with whiteboards would be nice. That sort of arrangement. And you can maybe close the door so you get acoustic attenuation from, you know, the other people outside, you know, as Alex was showing us in his facility. I think something like that. But movable desks, they're not nearly as common as movable tables, even today.
Yeah, I guess just to add on Peter's comment, I guess movable desks are more common in co-working space. But honestly, I guess not really a lot of people like movable desks. Well, there are a lot of movable desks in co-working spaces for the sole reason it's because they want to turn the desk space into an event space. Not a lot of users would prefer movable desks given all the wiring and stuff. It's not fit to purpose.
And to add on to that, I have 2 points that I think are important to the design of any small team with limited space. Is first of all, the biggest perk that you can bring into any office is natural light. So if you do provide movable desks, make sure that everyone gets access to the windows, or that you can put them on rotation. Usually what I find is that the boss takes the desk right by the window, the only window in the entire office, and all the staff have to work in darkness or in fluorescent light. That's not fun. But the second thing is that to Peter's point earlier, he's absolutely right. You know, power sockets do not really move around, but and knowing that, there is a way to design for it. We use a raised floor system here in the design, meaning that you can move your desk around and just take one plug, unplug it from the floor, and as you move your desk, we space them out around. I think it's approximately 2.5 meters between each PowerPoint. So you can always move your desks around and just plug them into the floor as you need it. So that kind of flexibility can actually really benefit this hypothetical space that you're speaking of.
One more question. This one is from Fred. So besides having a co-work space specifically for architects, what's your thinking on in this other kind of industry-specific co-working space, such as like art and craft or bakery, woodwork, like Alice just mentioned, or pottery, jewelry making? Do you see a chance in that kind of space happening?
I have one thing. After COVID-19, I think most people are going to be professional bakers. So most of them have probably already done it at home. But the interesting part about this question is that whichever you decide, you need to be able to provide them everything for that industry. And especially in a place like Hong Kong, where space is so hard to find, it's really tough to be everything to everyone every time. So if you want to be industry specific, absolutely go for it, but make sure that you can provide, if you're a baker, all the kinds of ovens and tools and space and ingredients that you need. That's really, especially when we were designing for our space, our biggest challenge was trying to really focus in on all those, all the amenities that industry is looking for.
some curiosity. So architects are known to have a lot of paper and material samples. And I believe you guys have the material library that share among all the designers in your office. How do you manage all those messy materials and paper and make sure that all the all the users coming in every day are not annoyed by each other? I guess this is a question for Alex specifically, because I guess you have the most amenities to manage with the industry-specific co-working space. So as you mentioned, if you want to provide such a space, you have to make sure that you have everything that that particular industry needs in their work. And architects, most of us still need a lot of paper and still need a lot of physical materials. So how do you manage all that, especially when you have different companies, small companies running in your co-work space?
Okay, sorry, I didn't know that that was specifically for me, but now that I do. So because we share the space with Integrated Design Associates, we share a lot of their resources with the greater co-working space. So IDA has its own material library and design books library. So people can come in and go as they please, or not as they please, but they can knock on the door and take a look, browse that material. The issue of paper, we do provide large format printers, and it was hard to estimate how much paper these companies would go through. So we have like ginormous recycle bins everywhere. We are asking everyone to minimize the amount of printing that they are going to be doing, but that entirely falls on their responsibility. Other than that, we can only recycle what they throw out. We don't see it as our role to manage your paper consumption, but just to be mindful of it, and we will send out reminders specific to conserving paper.
Do you charge them on printing as well?
Yes, we do. Of course, when they join, they get like a certain number of prints that are free that comes with the membership. But just so that we don't encourage violently printing booklets that they don't need, yeah, we will start charging by the page after a certain limit.
So Jacky, the same question actually goes to you two. Imagining that you have users who are furiously clicking on their laptop and then somebody trying to study their exam material quietly, how do you mitigate that possible conflict between different users?
Well, I guess that's one of the conflict is just to set out different areas, because for our users, especially, we have the quiet focus zones. People sometimes tends to have extraordinary high standards. For example, they may find people mouse clicking noise could be disturbing while they may be focusing on some exams. So, well, I guess the only thing that could sort of help to alleviate the issue is, well, we do have a reading lounge, which is a relatively more casual area. If sometimes we do have this type of complaints, we just need to ask people to move and to make sure, well, the space are respected for everyone.
Thank you, Jacky, for sharing. So I guess this is the last question from Vicky. So people in New York and probably a lot of other cities as well, because of the COVID-19, are fleeing office. So do you see an opportunity of apartment and office being merged into one same building so that people can work and live in the same space, or even more multiple users merging into the same building, such as, I don't know, schools, shops, we already have a lot of mixed-use buildings in Hong Kong right now, but then they're mostly usually designed like one whole building serving maybe 2-3 different functions, but not really revolving towards like the whole day in your life. Do you see that kind of things happening, Peter?
You know, I think people are getting. Honestly, I think people are getting fed up with working from home. I think there's the issue with the amount of space, the access to files, paper files, if that's what they need, storage. Maybe their kids are running around because they're not in school. And I think most people miss at least a short commute. You know, the idea of getting out of the house and going somewhere else. Whether it would make sense for one building to have, you know, housing on one, you know, a zone of levels and an office on another zone of levels. Oh, that might work, but you know, you're just going up and down a lift, and you know whether that would be something that somebody would want to buy into or not. I really don't know. I think humans like the idea of getting out of one environment, going into another environment, and the transition between the two. I think that's part of, you know, what makes us human. It's, you know, you're on the street, you're in the subway, you're in the MTR, you're on the bus, and so on. And it's all part of, you know, your life. And to give that up and think, you know, you're just going to either forever work from home, or you're going to just go up and down a lift in a building from your home to your office on another floor. Maybe for some people it could work, but I think most people sort of cherish the idea of the movement, the transition, you know, the whole idea of that. I have a friend in New York whose daughter works for Spotify, and she's been told that they're going to be working from home until the end of 2021. It's just, you know, I mean, it's you know, and I guess the Twitter people, you know, Jack Dorsey's people, I think they're all going to be working from home for the foreseeable future, so that they don't have to face coming into the office and potentially, you know, meeting somebody that may be, you know, COVID positive. And every company is handling this in a different way. But I don't really think that in the long term, that the idea of everybody working from home all the time is really what's going to do it. I think the idea of the office is here to stay.
Yep. I sort of agree as well. I guess it would be pretty sad to work in the same building every day, Monday to Friday. So you go to the first floor for office, and you go back to the 20th floor to your apartment building. I guess that's would be pretty sad. But I guess the potential, if that in the event that perhaps Monday to Thursday you'll be working in downtown Central, whereas on Friday, whereas your kids are at home, you will be disturbed. There could be a space at the same building that could be a flexible workspace. I guess that could work, but it's definitely not a Monday to Friday everyday type of thing. It's not an office concept.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, we do mentally build a transition space between our work and our private life. And this is something that once that line gets blurred, becomes very, very confusing. And actually, I think that this would lead to offices becoming a status symbol for some workers, meaning that not everyone can afford to go into an office, and if so long as it's all the amenities are provided for. So it's an interesting idea to have a work-live building. And I also want to add, how would that look on zoning? Like, do we need to change entire plots of land to be zoned for commercial and residential now? I don't know. It's a side question that I wonder about.
I think that's a fantastic answer to is using a question to answer another question. So thank you very much, everybody. I think it's been a really interesting conversation, and I learned a lot, and I hope you enjoyed it too.